The early morning mist clung to the temple grounds like a heavy cloak, soft rays of sunlight barely breaking through the thick air. The seeker, sitting cross-legged on the stone, struggled to calm the chaos inside their mind. Each breath felt forced, as if the weight of their thoughts was too much to bear. The trees surrounding the temple stood like ancient sentinels, silent and unyielding. Beside them, the mentor stood unmoving, their expression a mask of serenity. There were no comforting words, only the stillness of their presence. "The path is not what you think," the mentor spoke softly, their voice carrying the weight of unspoken truths. The seeker, troubled by these words, lifted their gaze, meeting the mentor's eyes. It was then that a voice, cutting through the tension, echoed from behind. The skeptic's mocking laughter reverberated in the quiet morning. "What do you know of loss?" The skeptic sneered, their tone full of disdain. The seeker felt a flicker of doubt rise within them, as if the ground itself was shifting. But the mentor said nothing more, their gaze unyielding and distant, leaving the seeker to ponder the deeper meaning of their words. The moment hung in the air, thick with uncertainty and the weight of unasked questions. The seeker stood, their body tense as the words of the mentor echoed in their mind. It was as if the very ground beneath them had begun to shift, a trembling that went beyond the earth and into their soul. They glanced at the mentor, searching for some kind of reassurance, but found none. The mentor's face remained unchanged, his eyes deep pools of calm that seemed to know the truth they sought, but refused to reveal it. The seeker's heart pounded in their chest, uncertainty swirling around them like the mist. "I don't understand," the seeker finally confessed, their voice barely more than a whisper. The mentor turned, his robes flowing gently with the movement, and looked at the seeker with an unreadable expression. "Understanding comes only when you stop seeking it," the mentor replied, his words like a riddle. The seeker felt their frustration growing, their thoughts racing in circles as the skeptic's voice floated to the forefront of their mind, mocking their every step. What was the point of this journey? What was the purpose of all their effort if they had nothing to show for it? "You must trust the process," the mentor continued, his voice steady, offering no comfort, only truth. The seeker hesitated, feeling the weight of the world on their shoulders. The moment felt suspended in time, as if their entire existence was hanging by a fragile thread, waiting to snap. The seeker's gaze dropped to the stone beneath their feet, their thoughts a whirlwind of questions they couldn't answer. What did the mentor mean by trust the process? They had followed the path, meditated, and prayed, yet every answer seemed to elude them. The skeptic's voice still rang in their ears, questioning the validity of this journey. Why would a path that promised enlightenment leave them so empty? The seeker's frustration was building, a pressure in their chest that felt like it might explode at any moment. And yet, the mentor remained quiet, unwavering in their stillness. The seeker opened their mouth to speak, but found no words. It was then that the fellow disciple approached, walking slowly, their presence a contrast to the seeker's turmoil. "You don't have to understand it all right now," the fellow disciple said, their voice soft yet firm. The seeker turned to them, their eyes filled with doubt. "How can I move forward when everything feels wrong?" The fellow disciple smiled gently, their eyes reflecting a deep calm. "You'll find your way," they assured the seeker. The seeker wasn't sure they believed it, but the simplicity of the fellow disciples' words settled something deep within them. Perhaps they were trying too hard. Perhaps they just needed to let go. The seeker sat down heavily on a stone bench, the weight of the moment pressing down on them. The mentor's words, the fellow disciples' reassurances, the skeptic's doubts, all of it seemed to collide inside their mind, creating a maelstrom of conflicting thoughts. They wanted to believe in the path, to trust in the teachings, but every step felt like they were walking in the dark. "What do I do now?" the seeker asked, their voice filled with desperation. The mentor, still standing tall, looked at them with steady eyes, offering no immediate answer. "You stop looking for answers," the mentor replied, "and begin to see what has always been here." The seeker's head snapped up at the words, but before they could respond, the skeptic's voice rang out once more, this time louder, mocking. "What is it you think you're searching for?" You'll find nothing here. The seeker stood abruptly, turning toward the skeptic, but the mentor's hand on their shoulder stopped them. There was no anger in the mentor's touch, only calm. Let go, the mentor advised quietly. The seeker took a deep breath, their mind still racing, but a flicker of understanding began to form in the back of their mind. The seeker's mind was a whirlwind of confusion, but something shifted in the quiet presence of the mentor. For the first time, they truly felt the weight of their own resistance. The skeptic's voice continued to echo in their mind, but it felt distant, insignificant now. The mentor's words had planted a seed of realization. They had been trying too hard. The path wasn't something to be grasped. It was something to be lived. With a deep breath, the seekers stood once more, their posture less tense, more open. I understand, they said softly, though they weren't sure they completely did. The mentor nodded, a hint of approval in their eyes, but said nothing more. The seeker turned to face the temple, the mist parting slightly as they took their first step forward, a sense of calm beginning to settle within them. This journey was not about finding answers. It was about being present in each moment, accepting each breath as it came. The seekers stood at the edge of the temple courtyard, staring out into the distance. Their mind felt clouded, thoughts heavy with doubt. The mentor's teachings lingered in their mind, but they could not grasp the meaning. Trust the process. How could they trust something so intangible? The seekers' frustration swelled, their hands trembling slightly as they clenched them into fists. The skeptic's voice echoed louder in their mind, mocking every step they had taken. You're lost, the skeptic's voice seemed to whisper, and you'll never find your way. The seeker exhaled sharply, their breath cold in the morning air. They wanted to believe. They had to believe. Yet, the tension in their chest only grew tighter with every passing moment. The mentor approached, their presence a stark contrast to the seeker's turmoil. Without a word, the mentor placed a hand on the seeker's shoulder, offering silent reassurance. The seeker turned to face the mentor, their face a mixture of anger and despair. Why does it feel like nothing is changing? The seeker asked, their voice raw with emotion. The mentor's eyes softened as they spoke, because you are still clinging to your expectations. Only by releasing them will you see the truth. The seeker's gaze shifted to the mentor, eyes filled with frustration and confusion. I've followed every step, done everything you've said, but nothing feels different. The mentor's expression remained serene, but there was a glimmer of something deeper in their eyes. The world is not as it appears to you, the mentor replied, their voice steady. You see it through the lens of your expectations, and it clouds your vision. The seeker felt a wave of anger rise within them. So what? I'm supposed to just stop trying? Give up? The mentor shook their head slowly. You must release your need to control. Only then will you see what is always before you. The seeker's mind raced. Could they truly let go? Was that even possible? The skeptic's voice again surfaced in their mind, as if to mock the idea. Nothing will change. You'll always be the same. The seeker clenched their jaw and took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm inside them. Maybe the mentor was right. Maybe the key was to stop fighting against the current. The seeker sat cross-legged beneath an ancient tree, the wind whispering through its branches. They had been meditating for what felt like hours, but every time they closed their eyes, the doubts crept in. The skeptic's voice, persistent and unforgiving, echoed in their mind. You'll never find peace. You're just wasting your time. It was so easy to believe that voice. Everything felt meaningless, like they were chasing something that didn't exist. The wind picked up, the rustling of the leaves only deepening the sense of unease. The seeker opened their eyes, glancing around the courtyard as if looking for some sign, some reassurance that they were on the right path. But there was only silence. They sighed deeply, feeling the weight of their confusion. Then, a soft voice broke the stillness. The fellow disciple, sitting across from the seeker, their presence calm and unshaken. You are fighting yourself, the fellow disciple said gently. You must learn to sit with your doubts, not push them away. The seeker looked up, startled by the simplicity of the words. It seemed too easy, yet something about it resonated deep within them. The seeker stood in front of the temple's reflection pool, the surface of the water still and glassy. They stared at their own reflection, seeing only uncertainty staring back at them. The skeptic's voice was loud in their mind, filling the space with doubt and cynicism. "You're not worthy of this journey. You're just pretending." The seeker's chest tightened as they looked at the reflection of their own face, as if it were a stranger. "What if I am just pretending?" the seeker whispered aloud. "What if I've been fooling myself this whole time?" The mentor's words echoed faintly in their mind. "Let go." The seeker clenched their fists at their sides, a surge of frustration rising up. But before they could speak again, the mentor appeared beside them, standing silently, their presence a steady anchor in the storm of emotions. "The mirror only reflects what you choose to see," the mentor said quietly. The seeker's gaze flickered to the mentor, but they didn't respond. For the first time, they were unsure if they could let go of their own expectations, or if that even meant freedom. The seeker lay awake in their room, the night stretching on endlessly. The words of the mentor and fellow disciple swirled in their mind, but they felt no closer to understanding. Let go, trust the process. But how? How could they release something they couldn't see, couldn't touch? They turned over, their mind racing. The skeptic's voice, sharp and dismissive, drowned out the others. "You're just pretending to seek peace. You'll never find it." The seeker sat up, their chest tight, feeling the weight of their doubt. They wanted to give in, to accept that the path was meaningless. But something inside them resisted, a flicker of hope, a whisper that they might still find what they were searching for. With a deep breath, they stood up, walking to the window and looking out at the stars. The night was silent, still, yet the sky above seemed vast, endless. Perhaps the answers weren't in their mind, but in the space between thoughts, the stillness they had been avoiding all along. The seeker stood at the base of the temple's mountain, the path ahead winding and uncertain. They had been instructed to meditate here for days, but each attempt only seemed to amplify their frustration. Trust the process. How could they trust something so intangible? The seeker's frustration swelled, their hands trembling slightly as they clenched them into fists. The doubt in their heart had become a heavy weight, pressing down with each step they took. The skeptic's voice echoed louder in their mind, mocking every step they had taken. "You're lost," the skeptic's voice seemed to whisper, "and you'll never find your way." The seeker exhaled sharply, their breath cold in the morning air. They wanted to believe. They had to believe. Yet, the tension in their chest only grew tighter with every passing moment. The mentor approached, their presence a stark contrast to the seeker's turmoil. Without a word, the mentor placed a hand on the seeker's shoulder, offering silent reassurance. The seeker turned to face the mentor, their face a mixture of anger and despair. "Why does it feel like nothing is changing?" the seeker asked, their voice raw with emotion. The mentor's eyes softened as they spoke. "Because you are still clinging to your expectations. Only by releasing them will you see the truth." The seeker sat cross-legged beneath an ancient stone arch, the sound of their breath steady but their mind still in turmoil. The mentor had given them no answers, only cryptic words that only seemed to deepen their confusion. "Let go," the mentor had said. But what did that even mean? The seeker's thoughts raced, overwhelmed by questions with no answers. The skeptic's voice, persistent and unforgiving, echoed in their mind. "You'll never find peace. You're just wasting your time." It was so easy to believe that voice. Everything felt meaningless, like they were chasing something that didn't exist. The wind picked up, the rustling of the leaves only deepening the sense of unease. The seeker opened their eyes, glancing around the courtyard as if looking for some sign, some reassurance that they were on the right path. But there was only silence. They sighed deeply, feeling the weight of their confusion. Then a soft voice broke the stillness, the fellow disciple sitting beside the seeker, their presence calm and unshaken. "You are fighting yourself," the fellow disciple said gently. "You must learn to sit with your doubts, not push them away." The seeker looked up, startled by the simplicity of the words. It seemed too easy, yet something about it resonated deep within them. The seeker walked the narrow path leading deeper into the temple's sacred grove, their minds still filled with questions. The mentor's words rang in their ears, "Trust the process." Yet, the more they tried, the more distant the truth felt. The world around them seemed blurry, like they were standing on the edge of a precipice, unsure of which way to turn. They had failed at their meditations. They couldn't silence their mind. "I'm not good enough," the seeker muttered, the familiar voice of the skeptic pushing its way back into their thoughts. But just then, a gentle breeze moved through the trees, carrying a subtle fragrance that seemed to ground them. The seeker paused, breathing deeply. For the first time in days, they allowed themselves to be still. And in that stillness, something shifted, just a tiny crack in the wall of doubt. They weren't sure what it was, but it felt like the beginning of something new. The seeker sat by a small fire in the evening, their eyes fixed on the flickering flames. The day had been long, and they felt the weight of their inner conflict more than ever. The skeptic's voice was loud in their mind, filling the space with doubt and cynicism. "You're pretending. There's nothing real here." The seeker clenched their fists, feeling the anger build within them. How could they have come so far only to end up here, on the edge of surrender? But then the fellow disciple's voice came softly, cutting through the storm of their thoughts. "The truth is not something you find. It is something you awaken to." The seeker's gaze flickered toward the fellow disciple, their words lingering in the air like the smoke from the fire. Could it really be that simple? Could they truly stop seeking and just awaken? The seeker awoke before dawn, the sky outside still dark. The journey had taken its toll, and yet they felt something stirring deep within them. The mentor's words echoed in their mind, clearer now than ever. "Let go." They rose to their feet, moving toward the temple's edge once more. There was no specific reason for it, no direction to follow, only the instinct to walk. As they moved, the first light of dawn began to break, casting a soft, golden glow over the temple grounds. The air was fresh, cool, and filled with the promise of something new. The skeptic's voice had quieted, replaced by a growing sense of peace. The seeker paused, standing in the middle of the courtyard, breathing in the stillness. Maybe this was what the mentor had meant, the act of simply being. For the first time they felt an overwhelming sense of calm. The seeker walked deeper into the temple's sacred woods, their heart heavy with unspoken truths. Their mind wandered back to their past, to the memories that had shaped them. The skeptic's voice still echoed, "You cannot outrun your past." The seeker paused, as if those words had rooted them to the spot. They felt trapped, not by the world around them, but by the shadows of their own past. The mentor's words surfaced, "You must face what you fear most." Taking a deep breath, the seeker closed their eyes, letting the stillness wash over them. For the first time, they were willing to confront the past that had been holding them back. The seeker sat before a stone altar in the heart of the woods, their breath steady but their mind racing. The mentor had told them to let go, but how could they release something so deep, so ingrained in them? Their past was a part of them, woven into their identity. "You can't escape who you are," the skeptic whispered. The seeker's fist clenched at their side, but they didn't speak. Instead, they focused on their breath, trying to let go of the voice of doubt. Slowly, a new realization took root within them. The past didn't define them. It was only a part of their journey. They could choose a different path now. The seeker stood before the mirror-like reflection of a pool, staring into the surface. The ripples distorted their image, just as their thoughts had distorted their perception of themselves. "You are not enough," the skeptic taunted, its voice growing louder. The seeker felt the weight of their insecurities pressing down on them. "Enough for what?" they whispered to themselves. They realized that the question had never been about enough. It was about being present, accepting themselves as they were. With a deep breath, the seeker let the stillness of the pool calm their racing thoughts, finally seeing the reflection they had been avoiding. The seeker walked back to the temple gates, feeling the weight of their doubts, but also a growing sense of understanding. The skeptic's voice had quieted, but not fully. "You're not ready," it whispered. But the seeker could feel it, the shift inside them. They had faced the fears that had been holding them back. The path was still unclear, but they were no longer afraid to walk it. As they turned to leave, the mentor's voice called out from behind, "You are ready when you no longer seek approval." The seeker nodded silently, feeling the truth in those words. The seeker stood in the temple's main hall, looking out over the courtyard below. The silence was profound, and for the first time, they didn't feel the pressure of expectations. The past, with all its weight, had been acknowledged but no longer controlled them. "I am not my past," they whispered to themselves. The skeptic's voice was gone now, replaced by the soft hum of stillness. The seeker closed their eyes and took a deep breath. In this moment, they finally felt the peace they had been seeking. The journey was far from over, but for the first time they felt ready to face it, no longer bound by fear. The seeker stood at the temple's highest point, gazing out over the vast expanse of land below. The morning sun bathed the landscape in golden light, signaling a new day, a new beginning. The mentor's words echoed in their mind, "Let go of what you think you know." For the first time, the seeker felt the truth of those words. Everything they had been seeking was already here within them, in the stillness. They had spent so much time fighting, trying to understand, when all they needed to do was surrender to the present. With a deep breath, they released the tension that had gripped them for so long. The weight of doubt lifted, and they could finally see clearly. The seeker sat in meditation, the soft rustling of leaves, the only sound in the stillness. The realization was simple, yet profound. They had been seeking an answer outside themselves, when the answer had always been within. The voice of the skeptic, once so loud, was now a faint whisper. "You can't escape the truth," it said, but this time the seeker didn't feel the sting. They had confronted their doubts and fears, and now they understood. The truth was not a destination, it was a moment, a fleeting experience that could only be realized when the mind was quiet enough to hear it. The seeker walked through the temple gardens, each step feeling lighter than the last. They could feel the weight of their past lifting, replaced by a quiet sense of acceptance. The mentor watched them from a distance, their presence a steady reminder of the journey. "You have found your way," the mentor said softly. The seeker smiled, a quiet sense of peace settling within them. They no longer sought validation, no longer felt the need to prove anything. They had simply allowed themselves to be. And in that acceptance they found freedom. The seeker stood by the temple's reflection pool, watching the water ripple gently. For the first time they truly understood the stillness of the surface. The reflection of their face was no longer distorted by doubt or fear. It was clear, calm. The skeptic's voice no longer held power over them. They had become the still water, unmoved by external forces. As they gazed into the reflection, they realized they were no longer searching for something outside of themselves. The truth, like the water, had always been there, waiting to be seen. The seeker stood before the temple gates, the weight of their journey finally lifting. The path ahead was still uncertain, but they no longer feared it. "You are ready now," the mentor said, their voice a quiet affirmation. The seeker nodded, understanding that the journey was not about finding answers, it was about embracing the questions. They had learned to walk without the burden of expectations, to live without the need for control. With a final deep breath, the seeker stepped forward, ready to continue the journey. The seeker stood in the center of the temple's sacred hall, feeling a profound sense of peace. The doubts that had once clouded their mind were now distant echoes. With every step they took, they felt lighter, as if the weight of their past had been shed. The mentor watched from a distance, silent but approving. "You have released what was never yours to hold," the mentor said. The seekers smiled softly, their heart no longer burdened. They had let go, not of their memories or their past, but of the attachments that had tied them down. They were no longer seeking validation or answers. In this stillness, they had found everything they had been searching for. The seeker walked through the temple gardens, their steps slow and deliberate. The air was still, filled with the scent of flowers and the sound of birds in the trees. Each breath they took felt like a deep connection to the present moment. The transformation they had undergone was not sudden, but gradual, like the unfolding of a flower. They no longer fought against the flow of life. Instead, they moved with it, embracing the rhythm of existence. The skeptic's voice had long since quieted, replaced by a gentle hum of understanding that resonated within them. The seeker stood at the edge of a cliff, gazing out over the valley below. The landscape stretched for miles, vast and beautiful, like a reflection of their inner transformation. The mentor had told them that they would know when they were ready. And now, standing here, with the wind in their hair and the sun on their face, the seeker knew. They were ready. They had walked through their doubts, faced their fears, and emerged not unscathed but stronger. The world had not changed, but they had. And in that change, they had found peace. The seeker returned to the temple, their heart light and their mind clear. The challenges they had faced had not disappeared, but their perspective had shifted. They now understood that true peace came not from avoiding struggles, but from accepting them. As they walked through the temple gates, the mentor appeared beside them, offering no words but a quiet nod. The seeker felt no need for praise or recognition. They had already found what they needed: the strength to continue, the clarity to walk the path, and the peace to accept whatever came next. The seeker stood alone in the center of the temple's courtyard, the silence profound and deep. The world seemed to pause, holding its breath. There was no longer a need to search, to strive, or to prove. The seeker had reached a place of complete acceptance. They were not perfect, and they did not have all the answers, but they no longer needed them. The journey itself had become the destination. With a final deep breath, the seeker smiled, knowing that this was not the end, but the beginning of a new way of being. The seeker stood at the edge of the temple, looking out over the valley as the sun began to set. The world seemed to glow in the soft light, peaceful and still. Their heart was light, no longer burdened by the doubts that had once consumed them. They had embraced the path, not as a means to an end, but as the journey itself. "I am not lost," the seeker whispered, the words feeling true in the stillness of the moment. The mentor's teachings had led them here, not to a destination, but to the understanding that every step was part of the whole. The wind carried a quiet affirmation, as if the world itself acknowledged their growth. The seeker walked slowly through the temple grounds, their steps light and unhurried. There was no rush, no urgency, only the presence of the moment. Each footstep felt connected to the earth beneath them, as though they were in perfect harmony with the world. The skeptic's voice had long since faded, replaced by an inner stillness that was profound in its simplicity. The seeker smiled softly to themselves, a quiet understanding settling in their heart. They no longer needed to search for meaning. It was enough to simply be, to exist fully in each passing moment. The seeker sat on a stone bench, gazing at the stars beginning to appear in the night sky. The temple was silent, the world around them still and full of quiet wonder. They had come so far, but the journey was not over. It would never truly end. "I am here," the seeker whispered, feeling a deep sense of contentment. They no longer sought approval, nor did they feel the need to prove anything. They were simply present, existing in this moment, at peace with themselves and the world around them. The seeker returned to the temple's reflection pool, standing before its still surface. The water was calm, mirroring the clear sky above. There was no distortion, no ripples of doubt. For the first time, the seeker saw their reflection clearly, not as a person seeking, but as someone who had arrived. "I am whole," they whispered softly, the words simple yet true. The reflection was no longer fragmented by fear or uncertainty. They had found peace, not through escaping, but through embracing everything they were. The seeker stood by the temple gates, the world beyond them quiet and full of possibility. They were ready, not because they had answers, but because they had learned to live with the questions. The mentor stood beside them, a silent presence that spoke volumes. "You are not lost," the mentor said, their voice warm but steady. "You have found your way." The seeker smiled, feeling the truth of those words resonate deep within them. With a final contented breath, the seeker stepped forward, embracing the path ahead without fear, ready for whatever came next.